Hey there, welcome to Carol Reinlie's Imagination Podcast. I'm so excited today. We have the wonderful and amazing Luc Jean-Louis, and he hosts a podcast called The Deep Voice Man Show, which I was actually on a couple weeks ago. Had so much fun that I invited him here. He helps professionals promote themselves and share their expertise and life lessons, and he's an amazing questioner. From being on the show. So check it out. It's the Deep Voice Man Show, and we'll share the link at the end here. Starting the show has been life-changing for him because it expanded his network. And he's also a budding voiceover artist, as you will see with his voice here, and works in the business funding space. So as a result of doing the podcast, he realized that he wanted to exit the rat race. Hey, you and probably many millions of others and have time freedom. And the guest he spoke to inspired him to do so. He's done over 100 shows so far. So check it out with the link that we share at the end of the show. And we'll share his other links as well. Through the podcast, he's been introduced to several opportunities and amazing individuals. So welcome, Luc. Thank you for your time today. I know, and we've kind of been playing around with wealth in your life.
Yes.
So talk about your experiences with wealth in your life, because the way that I look at it is we've been taught one thing, and we kind of see that out in the world, but what we experience can be a completely different thing, and it's different for different people. So anyway.
Sure.
On it.
Well, first I wanted to go ahead and thank you, Carol, for having me as a guest on this show. This is actually my first podcast interview, so I'm very kind of nervous, but very excited at the same time. So thank you. You got it. It's an honor to be on your show. And so thank you so much. When it comes to wealth, it's interesting because over the years, I've read a lot of books on personal development, on wealth and business and whatnot. And I've come to the conclusion that obviously there's different types of wealth. There's health wealth, there's money wealth, which we're all familiar with, right? And there's time wealth, spiritual wealth, and so on and so forth. So some people are rich in one area, but sort of poor and lacking in other areas, right? So the goal of my life is I want to be rich in each and every one of the areas. So being successful and having time freedom is something that means a lot to me. It's something I want to accomplish, of course. Obviously, as I've been working, doing the 9 to 5 like everybody else, trying different opportunities and not exactly succeeding, but that's okay. But not giving up and whatnot. But I think that I've sort of found my glide path in recent days. Just to give you a little background on me, I'm someone who I went to college. I also obtained my MBA. So as you know, we were always told, have all this education. In my case, my education was very expensive. Sometimes I think that it may not have been worth all the money I paid for it. I think I'm not the only one who feels that way. But obviously, I had all the student loans. Thankfully, I've been able to pay down the majority of it. Still have some more to go, of course. But I think for a lot of folks, particularly people who are raising children who want to start a family, time freedom is so important. The ability to choose your own hours when you want to work and whatnot, and not be tied to a job that you don't like. So for me, obviously, I want to be there for my family when I start one, and I want to also have time freedom so I could be able to travel the world. I'm someone who loves history, and I'm someone who wants to visit different nations. And I just don't like the idea of being tied to a desk for 40 plus hours a week, working for someone else and helping someone else accomplish their dream. So, obviously I want more control over my life and whatnot. And I don't want to just live for the weekend. I want every day to be set like Saturday, so to speak.
Great view. It's like, I think, and it's funny you talk about your education, because that was something that my father, yes, it's up to you, but You're gonna like as he would do whatever as long as I was gonna go. And I remember looking at after business school, like, should I do MBA? Should I do something else? And I ended up going to art school instead because I was like, well, that I can get through in a year, and it applied to the job that I was doing at the time, and I was already doing artwork and other things for people. So it was like I was already doing it, but I felt like I needed that piece of paper to say that I could. And I think that's where, like, our society, I'm so glad you brought that up. Our society tells you need to get this education. But are we really looking at like the economics of it?
Right.
Because if you're going to spend, let's say, $100,000 on going for 4 or 5, whatever years, how many years it takes somebody these days. Sometimes it takes 5, sometimes it takes longer. Most of the time.
Right.
I've also talked to people who flew through it in 3. So it's like everybody's a little different. Do you want to plunk down that much money when, if you look at the economics of what's out there and jobs,
right?
How long would it take you to pay that? Where it used to not be that way. I think in maybe my father's and maybe before that, those generations, it wasn't like that.
Right.
It got more and more expensive to the point where there's so many opportunities to learn. You could pretty much learn just about anything. And it seems like, I remember when we won't talk about what happened last year, but when everything got shut down and I had to have, I think it was a plumber come out to my house. He was laughing. He said, I've been working like 12 and 14-hour days. Why? Because where did all that toilet paper that people rushed out to get when everything got shut down, where did it go? It got stuck in places, and I have to come out and get it. So I was laughing. He was happy that mine was just like my little garbage disposal.
Yeah, wow.
Like, oh gosh, that would be funny. But he was saying, yeah, and there's not enough people around, so I've been working. It's like, where have the trades gone? And where are those, like, probably more important, and people can get a quicker job that way, and they're not having, maybe they have to go through an apprenticeship and maybe some technical knowledge, but getting out there. I mean, I think back and I'm probably dating myself, it's like back in my father's day, they just went and got one job, and they were in that one job for 30, 40, 50, whatever years.
You're right.
And then it's not like, I don't know anybody in around my age range who's had that whatsoever.
Right.
In their lifetime. And I've had my own business now for about 25 years. So I kind of work with the 9-to-5ers and kind of right outside of it, but within my own thing. And I think there's more people that can teach you the skills of entrepreneurship out there.
Right.
The Shark Show, and they have all the other things up. I think there's the thing I've been looking at called Learn, which is LURN, that has an amazing bit of education with Onyx Singal, I think is how you say it.
Right.
And he does stuff with the shark. But anyway, there's so much more out there today about entrepreneurship and really owning your own time and only owning your own space. So that on one hand, and I'll say it from being an entrepreneur for this long, it's like on the one hand, it's a lot easier now than when I started 25 years ago.
Right.
What I did is I just went out and I asked people that were successful, that had been in business a while, like,
right.
What were the things you learned? What were the things that you wouldn't do again? And so now we can go and get all that online. You wouldn't have to necessarily take somebody to lunch to do that. They used to say, take somebody to lunch and pick their brain and all that other stuff. I kind of miss that aspect of it. It's like, that's probably why you do the podcast. That's why I do my podcast. It's like, I love connecting with people and I love getting their, viewpoint because, I've got my viewpoint. My viewpoint's a little bit wider these days. It's like, it's not all about me. There's a whole world of people out there doing business in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And the other part of that is, and I'll ask you a question about this, it's like
Sure.
what I'm seeing now is the disconnect between making money and actually being a creator.
Right.
A little bit.
Hmm.
Because you have these people that can go wave their booty on TikTok and make $1 in a weekend or something, crazy like that. And you're like, okay, what does that create? Well,
It's weird. I don't know. It's interesting. I grew up with dial-up internet, and
yeah.
so there was no social media at the time. But I could never have imagined that there'd be something like TikTok and people making money that way. Also being influencers on Instagram, you hear them making a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I think it goes to show you that with the internet, there's a lot of opportunity. And some people are taking advantage of that opportunity, doing that, and uh, you know, uh, all the best to them and whatnot. If it's working for them, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with you. It may seem a little silly, but if people are making money this way, that's okay, I suppose. But you mentioned that obviously with the internet, there's been a lot of opportunity out there. And you see it all the time. I interview guests, and a lot of their stories are motivating. They talk about how they quit their job and just said, hey, I'm going to go off on my own and be a coach or be an entrepreneur of some kind, and they did it, which is amazing. And so speaking with those people definitely inspired me and whatnot. And you talked about how with the podcast that you get to meet incredible people, right?
Mm.
I started my show based on a book I read by Steve Gordon called Unstoppable Referrals. He basically was networking the old way and not having a lot of success, but he started networking by interviewing folks and putting the interviews on CD-ROM. A lot of young people may not be familiar with CD-ROM. I don't think. I
Yeah.
don't know if they still. I guess we still use CD-ROMs here or there.
Sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, obviously he did that, and he had a lot of success with it. He was sort of like a success journalist, and it put his name out there and whatnot. And he's with that network that he built by interviewing people, and almost no one turned out an interview request, which was great. He was able to build relationships with these folks, and so I decided, based on the books I read by him, to start my own podcast. And I named it the Deep Voice Man Show because people have always complimented me on my low pitched voice. So and said, "Hey, Luke, you should do something with your voice." And so I said, "Okay, let's call this show the Deep Voice Man Show." People like hearing my voice. I'll call it that and whatnot. Every podcast has to have some kind of gimmick or a great title. So it's funny. I looked up the URL for Deep Voice Man, and it was available, and I was so lucky. I was like, "Oh, this is great." So I took it, grabbed it, and so yeah, it's funny. I started the podcast in January. I have close to 100 episodes, and it's been amazing so far. I've met incredible successful people. The highest profile guest that I've been able to interview on my show is a gentleman named Travis Rosbach. He is the founder of Hydro Flask, a very popular water bottle company. He's had an interesting life at the age of 42. He's been all over the world. He's met with Oprah Winfrey, other billionaires, and he's been a pilot. He's been a yoga instructor. He's been a boat captain. So by far the funnest episode. But, it's interesting. I met him through a stroke of luck, because through networking. I met a guy who knew him, and that's the thing about networking. The more you network, the luckier you get, so to speak. And
Yeah.
it's funny how that works.
It is funny
And
how that works. I guess they say
yes,
like it's 6 degrees of separation. You can always get to somebody.
right.
You have like maybe a couple people, past them, and they, you figure out where they go and all that stuff. Not to stalk or anything, but just to connect
Definitely,
in an authentic
definitely,
way. So yeah, we live in a great time where I feel like you can connect with just about anybody.
definitely. Particularly with LinkedIn and other social media platforms, and so it's easier to network than ever. Obviously, nothing will ever take the place of in-person networking, of course.
Yeah.
Nothing quite like it. But obviously, the thing is, the most successful people have very wide and deep networks. If anyone's ever read the book by Keith Ferrazzi, Never Eat Alone, highly recommend that book.
Yeah.
Right, you've read it. And so he talks about how successful people have these wide networks. And so, I decided that, I want to go out and I want to build a network. And I knew that doing a podcast would be the best way to do it. And I love talking to people. I'm a great conversationalist. And so I decided to give it a go, and that I've definitely had some success with it. The audience has been building day by day and whatnot. I have listeners all over the world. It's crazy. So podcasting is something that I recommend to everyone and anyone. It's definitely something people should look into if they want to become successful, build their network, and build relationships with the kind of people they want to build relationships with by going to certain types of people and offering them an interview request. And almost no one turns you down. Think about that. That's amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah. And, I think, especially with everything that went on last year, like just having someone listen and ask you questions is like a gift.
Yes.
It's like, oh, there's somebody that, I'm not running around and trying to get everything done. I think we've been in this busy world. The busyness is kind of seems like this badge of honor. And with last year, I think that was the gift of all that. I had to go inward and really look at everything in our life, that worked, that didn't work, all of that. So is that kind of what led you into the podcast?
Sure.
Also?
I would say so, because what happened was I was working 9 to 5. I was working in customer service, and I was working at a firm that actually handled visas for travelers. Now, as you can imagine, with the pandemic shutting down all the flights and whatnot, that wasn't going to continue. So the firm actually had to shut down for a while. So I was laid off, like many others. And it took me a long time to get unemployment insurance. So it was a very stressful time and whatnot. But obviously I got through it. We all got through it. And it was a tough period. But I got to thinking, and I was reading books and whatnot. That's what I did with my time. I didn't binge watch Netflix. I've never been into that, so I must be in a small minority. So I did.
Well, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. I'm choosing with my time.
So I was reading books, and I was like, maybe I can start a podcast. And so I was just doing some Googling around, and then I realized that there's a free platform to do a podcast, because all the other podcast hosting sites cost money. And me being a cheapskate, I really liked that it was free. So I I said, okay, let me jump on this. It was Anchor. And I still use the Anchor platform to this day. Great firm for anyone to start a podcast. So I started my podcast in January, and I've been going strong with it ever since. Sometimes I have interviews that last over 2 hours, which I know is maybe a bit unusual, but when you get people on and they talk about what they love, they can go on and on and on, and I'm okay with it.
Well, I think like Joe Rogan started like doing that, like where he was doing 2 and 3 hours, because he was somebody and they would just like have this conversation, which would lead to all this other information, and they would just go. And he didn't, like, people were always telling him that people aren't going to listen that long. It's like it ended up taking off, because they actually were like, if you're not binging Netflix or doing all the others, I call it mindless stuff. There's some really good stuff on there, but get choosy with it. But that's really not where I want to spend most of my time. It's like having these conversations, and it just rolls into so much good information. People are doing the longer things. Are you on Clubhouse at all?
Sure, it's interesting. There's so many different platforms out there,
Yeah.
and I did get into Clubhouse. I was kind of late to getting into Clubhouse,
Yeah, me
and
too. Me too.
yeah,
People had talked about
right,
it, and I was like, oh, I don't. There's not another. I don't even want to look at another thing. And then
right,
when people started getting kicked off places and this and that, and then I was adding more, I was like, yeah, while I'm adding this, and this, I'll just go ahead and take a look at it. But there's people talking just on just about anything all day long on there. But yeah.
It's interesting. Clubhouse. I thanks to my sister inviting me to Clubhouse. I actually do have it. I'm on the platform. I don't spend a lot of time on Clubhouse, but I do see the value of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of where maybe it's all going. Because I'm trying to think of what the other one is that's kind of like that, maybe Telegram. But there's so many now. It's like,
Yeah.
where do you go? I think you just kind of have to just do what works for you. And all of that. So I know that you said that Arnold Schwarzenegger is one of the people that you
Yes.
love to pick their brain or whatever. Why Arnold Schwarzenegger for you as a person that you admire and kind of would love to pick their brain?
Well, it's interesting. I like a lot of people, and so it's hard to choose one. But I guess I went with Arnold Schwarzenegger because Arnold Schwarzenegger is someone who was an immigrant. He came to his country from somewhere else, and he had a very successful immigrant story. And I love a successful immigrant story. My parents are actually immigrants from Haiti, and I was born and raised in New York City, so they had me here. But obviously, I identify a lot with these successful immigrants, and whatnot. And so I like Arnold Schwarzenegger because his story seems to resonate with me as a success. He's a successful immigrant. He came to his country not really knowing English, with I think $14 in his pocket and whatnot. And so, and look what he was able to accomplish. And it's just incredible. And so that's why, yeah, he's a bodybuilder, and doing lifting weights and doing resistance training is something that appeals to me. I was so upset when my gym was closed due to the pandemic and whatnot, and I used to go to the gym 2 out of every 3 days, believe it or not. So that was rough. But yeah, I mean, he has so many talents. He's dominated several different fields, and so he's someone who's always fascinated me. But there's others that I like as well. Oprah Winfrey, of course, is always inspiring to me, and plenty of other successful people that just too many to name, really, and whatnot. I like Colin Powell a lot. He was from New York City. He also had a Caribbean immigrant background. I think his parents were originally from Jamaica. So he is a fascinating person to me as well. So Barack Obama, several different. There's just too many to name. I guess I went with Arnold Schwarzenegger because he must have been one of the first people that came to mind.
Yeah, there are so many interesting people. So if Arnold Schwarzenegger said yes, would you have him on your podcast?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to challenge you now.
You know what? With social media, I could, and Twitter and all that, I could actually reach out to a lot of these famous people and say, hey, what's the worst that could happen? They say no and whatnot. So I'll take you up on that. I'm going to try to reach out to Arnold Schwarzenegger on Twitter, LinkedIn or whatnot, and say, hey, you want to come on the Deep Voice Man show? And we'll see if it happens. If he
has a deep voice, you guys can both do. Well, yeah. So do you still have relatives in Haiti?
Yes, I have plenty of family still in Haiti. Haiti is a country that has a lot of challenges. Obviously, they had that major earthquake, I believe, 11 years ago. and whatnot. But even prior to that, there were challenges, and even now there's a lot of political turmoil in Haiti, unfortunately, and that's why unfortunately my parents had to leave Haiti. They left Haiti for a better life. Haiti I think at the time they left. I think in the 70s, Haiti was going through some issues with the dictator that was and his son who was running the country and whatnot. I believe they actually did have a democratically elected president at the time they left, or around that time. I think he came about in the 80s, 90s. I think his name was called Aristide. But but it's a country that has a lot of issues and problems, unfortunately. So my father, he decided early on he wanted to leave, and so him and my mother, they both came to the United States, to New York City, and and then started a family.
Anybody here, or did they just say, "Hey, we're going"?
Sure. My understanding is that I don't think they knew that many people when they came here. They did come with other family members as well. I think my mother came with, and her sisters came along with some of her sisters, and some of my father's family came around the same time as him. I don't think they knew anyone when they came here. There may have been a community that they could identify with, but I don't think they knew anyone. But it's interesting that they did that so they could have so they can give a better life to myself. And I think that's amazing. I love the fact that I'm an American. I was born and raised in this country. I think this is a land of opportunity. I think there's a ton of opportunity here. And I'm definitely trying to, of course, take advantage of that opportunity as best as I can. And so I'm very fortunate that they were able to immigrate from Haiti and come here, because I'd rather live here than in Haiti.
It is a land of opportunity, and there's just so much that that we have available to us. And my dad's family came over from Germany, his grandparents, and he was raised by them, and so he kind of grew up in a German neighborhood. What I didn't realize, and I learned like right kind of on the edge of when he was dying, is his grandfather and grandmother and then his sister came over on a boat together. Because they just same thing. They just wanted a different opportunity. They just didn't have the opportunities that they wanted. In America, you could come and be whatever you want to be as a today, but kind of gets muddied in the waters a little bit. But anyway, they came over, and on the way they met this Jewish guy who helped them. And so his grandfather started these businesses, and he got them connected and helped him. The families got together for holidays, whatever. They were like family because they had really helped each other, because they didn't know anybody over here. And they ended up in Chicago area, but I think they came through New York like everyone did at the time. But it's like, it is the land of opportunity. And
absolutely.
I think you can, and it can be a little bit overwhelming because there is so much opportunity. Where do you start?
Right.
I think that we as a society, that's kind of where we can help guide people is, and I know that there's organizations that somewhat do that, but when people come here, it's like guide them to, what is your dream? What is your dream? And what would you like to do? And there is still a world of opportunity out there.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we get out there and we have our scrapes and we fail and we, succeed in different things, and we learn our lessons, and we, as creative individuals, we find our way. I think there's more, I want to say there's probably more opportunity today than there was back then, although there's more people, etc. So when people say that that there's not, I have to question that. Because even if you wanted, like you went to books when your job went away and made it happen.
Yeah.
Like if we can instill that in our kids, rather than you must go, because I think that's where we might have gone wrong, and you might disagree with me, but I'll ask you that question in a moment.
Sure.
But it's like our education system really is still back in the time of the factory. So we're teaching our kids to be factory workers, basically 9 to 5 in the corporate arena. What if we had, and I did actually have a friend tell me that they took their son to this thing the other day, and they had to create a business, and they had to realize what the business was going to be and how they were going to fund it and do all these, and so they're starting to teach that. I think if we teach that in the schools, then we would have this land of the free, of all the free creators that are out there using their unique brilliances, rather than saying you got to go through A, B, C, D, and then you get Z. You can do whatever you want to. Everybody's different. Everybody has unique capacities.
Right.
Your strengths might not be my strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what I would say. I don't know what your viewpoint on that is, as far as how you like because you said you did the MBA, you did went to college. How do you feel like if you would have learned about entrepreneurship earlier on versus you must go get a piece of paper in order to get out in the world?
Right.
Where would that have changed where you were?
It's funny that you mentioned that. A lot of the things that I've learned on my own that have helped me to achieve success, I actually did learn in school. I learned on my own, obviously reading books and whatnot. And so I totally agree with you. Obviously networking is so important. You don't necessarily learn that in school. And learning how to sell. Perhaps there's no sales training in schools that I'm aware of. When I went to school, there was no classes on learning how to sell. So, and these are all very important skills. And I guess I can go on and on and on. So I sort of had to buy books, pay for courses, and learn this all on my own and figure this out and whatnot. If I were to go back in time and do it all over again, I probably would have went to a school that was not expensive. I still would have went to college, but not a private college. Or perhaps I'd still go to college that was private, but as long as I didn't have to pay a lot for it. And I probably wouldn't have gone to business school. I think looking back on it, that was a mistake. But obviously, you can't do anything about the past. As you know, they say the past stands for preoccupation about spent time. So
that's a good one.
Yes. So actually going forward, obviously I should have gotten the education without all the money, borrowing a ton of money. But I would say that, I do think it's important to go to school, maybe college, obviously, but don't pay a lot for it. My understanding is they may come out with a program for free community college soon or whatnot. Take advantage of public colleges that are more affordable. But I would say that, people really need to consider entrepreneurship. Particularly with the opportunities that are available now, if they want that time freedom. So many people want to be there for their kids. And I think a lot more people are understanding this. I think a lot more people are trying to exit the rat race, so to speak. And I think more and more people realize that it's not, they don't just have to trade time for money. There are other options out there. And so I think, particularly now, since a lot of people are working from home, I think more and more people are beginning to understand this a little bit better. So I think that what was thought to be a weird way of thinking may become more mainstream going forward into the future. But
Yeah. And I think, as far as like having to pay a lot for I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I know, when I went to art school that my employer helped pay for that, because it was associated with my job. So there are some employers that can pay.
Right.
I think that's what they were working on, like, is if you had somebody who you would pay for their college. And I see this in like medical schools, nursing schools here in Georgia. It's like they'll pay for a certain amount of your college if you agree to work for them, like for so many years or whatever. So there are a lot of more programs, I think, today that do that. And then also, I saw that NYU was doing like medical school was free for those that could get in.
Oh, wow. That's
So
amazing.
they were basically like, I think that happened last year. And I was
Hmm.
like, wow, that's big because
Yeah.
in that industry, they're kind of afraid that because of all the legalities and all the insurance that they have to have, and everything's so sensitive that
Mm.
how many people really want to go through 8 years or more of school and
Hmm.
pay for it to be in a profession where it's like you have some,
Right.
it's kind of like the expense of going to a private school or you're going to be paying for it and you might not have the economics there anymore
Right.
because the insurance is so high or
Yeah.
all of that. So it's just saying that, but that's such a good a point on that. So um and I know we're kind of running out of our time together, but what I wanted to, one last question I was going to ask you, and this has been such a juicy conversation today. So,
Oh, thank you.
um, I'm sure we could solve all the problems of the world if we had several hours.
Yes, yes, yes.
But so if you were to describe yourself in just a few words, nobody knew you, what would those few words be?
Sure. The few words would be positive, uh, extremely nice, intelligent, uh, deep voice, and I suppose tall. Uh, but I guess you could. I guess I can round it off by saying people would consider me to be articulate as well, very agreeable, easy to get along with, and whatnot. I think I'm going past my few words limit,
That's
but
okay. All right. However you want to describe, there is no limit. There's
and
no limit on the show. So, no, I appreciate your time today. I think this was an amazing conversation. I love that you shared about your family being immigrants.
mhm.
I think that's such a strong part of our nation. And I look forward to possibly talking to you again. Please check out Luc Jean Louis and the Deep Voice Man Show, and he can be found at on Instagram as Luc Jean Louis, um,
Uh-huh.
on Facebook as TDMBS,
Yes.
Facebook.com. We got he's Luc Jean Louis on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
and that's JEAN, which is actually my middle name. It's funny. And LOUIS is the last name, is how you spell that. And then
Yes.
all of that at yahoo.com for his email, and then the deepvoicemanshow.com. I love that you got that. That actually, it's hard to find those that you're actually
Yeah.
about. So that's when you know it's divine. So check that out. He's a great interviewer and obviously has an amazing voice. Thank you so much for your time today. Check him out and thank you so much for listening, everybody. Have an amazing day.